Shane Burgos versus Edson Barboza takes place this weekend on the main card of UFC 262, Oliveira versus Chandler, and I can't wait for this featherweight bout. This is the perfect way to open up the main card with some action immediately as soon as the main card starts. Burgos versus Barboza is going to be absolute chaos, and if Tony Ferguson versus Beneil Dariush wasn't also on this card, I would pin this one as one of the guaranteed fight of the night performances from both of these men. I think it's going to be an absolute scrap, back and forth. Shane Burgos simply does not know any way of having a boring fight, and the same thing can be said for Edson Barboza. Really looking forward to this one. Shane Burgos, a little bit of a setback in his last fight after he did gather some momentum before that. He lost to Josh Emmett. Very bad loss. It wasn't actually a terrible loss, but he took a lot of damage in the loss, which is why I'm saying it's a bad loss. It was actually a very close fight, and he actually had an argument to get a draw against Josh Emmett because there's a chance that he could edge out those first two rounds. Either way, rightfully so, Josh Emmett won the fight. Very, very close, but Josh Emmett was surely the winner of that bout, especially in that last round. 10-8 for sure. Really did put down Shane Burgos a couple of times badly with some big shots, as Josh Emmett usually does to his opponents. But Shane Burgos laughed them off, got back up, got back in his face, and made that third round an absolute scrap with Josh Emmett. Really fun fight. You've got before that, though, Makwan Amirkhani, Cub Swanson, Kurt Hollabaugh. Kurt Hollabagh's not really a good win, but it was a bounce back after a loss to Calvin Kattar before. But the Cub Swanson win's really good, and so's the Makwan Amirkhani win. It's actually the same win that Edson Barboza is coming off of himself in the featherweight division. If you don't know, Makwan Amirkhani stepped in on very short notice to take on Edson Barboza. Barboza really did put a beating on him quite badly in that fight, but in the third round, Makwan Amirkhani started doing somewhat okay with Edson Barboza. Now, he did have short notice, and Makwan Amirkhani is usually a guy that does slow down as the rounds go on anyway, just like Edson Barboza, so he didn't really have the right type of style or conditioning to really take advantage of Edson Barboza in that third round the way many fighters do. Either way, you could argue that Edson Barboza, right now, is on a 3-fight winning streak. 2 at lightweight, one at lightweight and 2 at featherweight, because he definitely beat Paul Felder in their rematch, and he definitely beat Dan Ige. So, arguably, he's on a 3-fight winning streak, and that really does suck for Edson Barboza, because if he did get that win against Paul Felder, he would be in a really nice position right now in that lightweight division, and it's wide open right now. No Khabib. I know he has that loss to Tony Ferguson, but he could have been in the mix with guys who are in conversations to take on big names in that division. Like, I wouldn't mind his chances. He already has a win over Dan Hooker as well. Would he have been the guy that took on Chandler to welcome him to the UFC? If he won that one, would he have been the guy taking on Charles Oliveira? Right now, for a belt on this same card, it's very, very shameful the way that these decisions have ruined Edson Barboza's career. But he recently bounced back against Makwan Amirkhani with an extra clear unanimous decision where he really did beat up Makwan Amirkhani in those first 2 rounds. I just think this is an absolute stylistic nightmare for Edson Barboza if I've ever seen one. And I'm going to be picking Shane Burgos to get the job done. Burgos, in my opinion, is going to win this one 29-27. I think he's going to lose the first round. I think it's going to be a good first round. Both guys landing good shots. Edson Barboza's going to land the bigger shots, and maybe, who knows, he drops Shane Burgos at one point in the round, but I don't think it's going to be enough for a 10-8 round for Edson Barboza. Round 2 comes around. I'm going to pick Shane Burgos to eventually get the better of Edson Barboza at the end of round 2 and sort of steal that round from Edson Barboza, because the pace that Shane Burgos fights at is just, it's crazy. I mean, you're talking about 7.5 strikes landed per minute. That's over a shot per 10 seconds. Significant strike. 1 significant strike at least per 10 seconds of a fight, and he never stops coming forward the entire time. I really like his chances here against Edson Barboza to set a really high pace early, be willing to take the shots that Barboza's going to dish out towards him, and try and overwhelm Barboza as this fight goes on, because I feel like we're seeing a little bit of a power difference with Barboza in the 145-pound division. He's still as fast as he was, maybe if not faster. He maybe is one of the fastest guys in the UFC, in all honesty, pound for pound, because the speed of this man, when he wants to throw real significant, meaningful shots, is ridiculous, but I just didn't see him put out Makwan Amirkhani. I don't think I can assume that he's going to put out Shane Burgos, a guy who put out Makwan Amirkhani. I don't think Barboza's going to have the power to finish Shane Burgos, and if he can't get a finish, he is going to be locked in there at a very high pace, and he really slows down every single fight, even in the Makwan Amirkhani one, when Makwan Amirkhani was the guy taking it on short notice. He slowed down in that fight. I don't like that for Edson Barboza. I don't like that for Edson Barboza whatsoever. I'm calling a close second round that Shane Burgos is going to steal at the end of it by landing a good flurry at the end and just barely edging out the round. Then in the third, I'm going to call a 10-8 round for Shane Burgos. I do not believe that Edson Barboza is going to get finished in the third round. There is a chance that he will, but Shane Burgos has always had trouble really having the power to put someone out cold. So often you'll see with his finishes, they're usually TKOs, or his guy is just way too tired to get back up and defend themselves, so they're just completely exhausted, while Burgos rains down shots on top. He doesn't really have that one-shot knockout power. He has knockdown power, so often his wins are by TKO, and I don't see him finishing Edson Barboza in the third round, because I see Barboza landing a lot of good shots to the legs and the body in the early rounds of this fight that I think is going to sort of hold back Burgos from going absolute Super Saiyan in the third, because he will be broken down by those leg kicks from Barboza, by the body kicks from Barboza as well. There's going to be no takedowns in this fight, in my opinion. Both guys on Google are listed at 5'9". Neither of them at 5'9". They're actually both 5'11", but Barboza's not even 5'11". He's actually 5'10". Burgos is going to be slightly taller than him, and a little bit bigger as well, which is going to be a shock to some people, because of course Barboza is the guy moving down a weight class, and that was such a far-fetched idea to everyone when he first announced that he was going to do it. I feel like Burgos is going to walk him down, eventually get to him in that third round, and really put a beating on him in that third as well, and maybe once the third round comes around, he starts mixing in the takedowns that we saw against Makwan Amirkhani, because if you'll remember, he spent the first round against Makwan stuffing all of his takedowns. Then in the third round, he was the guy going on Makwan on the ground, pinning him down, punching to the body. I mean, this is a guaranteed entertaining fight, but I just think the pace that Shane Burgos sets, and the toughness that he has, and the imposing figure that he is in the cage, is just going to be a little bit too much for Edson Barboza, and I think he's going to lose. Plus, Tiger Shulman, guys, might have the best shins in the sport. Just going to point out, I've never seen people take calf kicks, throw kicks, or just ignore leg kicks the way Tiger Shulman, guys, does. I mean, Jimmy Rivera recently as well was taking a bunch of bad kicks from Pedro Munoz, but he was a guy who was able to fight through the calf kick and the nerve damage and just keep going in that fight. Even though he lost, he was able to take that punishment quite well. Of course, Tiger Shulman, guys, was some of the real... not the first guys to bring in calf kicks, but they were some of the real guys that really started using it. They saw the calf kicks getting used and really started implementing that in all of their fights. Shane Burgos uses it in his fights. Jimmy Rivera uses calf kicks in his fights. I don't remember who he did it to, but Jimmy Rivera actually at one point used calf kicks on an opponent, and it was like a big shocker to everyone. I think it might have been Uriah Faber, if I'm not mistaken. I think there was a chance it was Uriah Faber, and Jimmy Rivera chopped up his calves real badly, and everyone was like, wow, this is going to be a real big deal moving forward in the UFC. And I think it might have been Uriah Faber. Either way, though, you know what I'm talking about. Calf kicks are good, and kicks in general are good with Tiger Shulman, guys. I think that's going to help him against Edson Barboza. I think he's going to do a better job checking kicks than other opponents like Makwan Amirkhani would, who's more of a boxer that doesn't really move his legs too much or doesn't really kick too much either. I feel like Shane Burgos is just a much better version of Makwan Amirkhani. Maybe not with the grappling, but just much better at striking, much better conditioning, way bigger, more powerful, better chin, like... far higher pace, better striking in any way you want to break it down. I feel like that is going to be the changing point for him to beat a guy like Edson Barboza in those later rounds. But I will say this. You want the MMA Guru pro tip? There is really good money to be made, because draws do happen. Draws do happen in the sport, okay? And I'm not going to tell you to put it in a parlay or anything like that, because usually when you get draws on a parlay, it gets voided anyway. But if I was to give you a bit of a betting advice, this is about as obvious a setup to a draw you will ever see in MMA. There are not many fights you can say that about. But I think Burgos versus Barboza, if you were to, any fight that's signed right now in the UFC, if you were to tell me, hey Guru, Look at every single fight in the UFC signed right now. Tell me which one's going to become a draw. I would say Burgos versus Barboza. So if you want to make a little bit of money, put some money on Burgos and Barboza going to a draw. I don't think it's going to happen, but there is a chance that Barboza does edge out those first 2 rounds and Burgos comes back with a 10-8 in the third looking for a finish. There's even more of a chance of a 10-8 in the third if Burgos knows that he's lost the second round because he knows he's going to need a finish and he's going to go for it as well. I think there's a very, very good chance that it's going to be a draw in this fight. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Burgos is going to edge out that second round just because he fights at such a high pace that he's going to end up doing a little bit what people do in the third round to Barboza. I think that's going to start a little bit earlier with Burgos because he does slow people down as the fight goes on with his high pace, and I think a draw is a good little prop bet because I'm assuming the odds are going to be pretty good for that. And I'm telling you, man, if I had to pick a draw, any fight that's been booked whatsoever, I'd pick this. Perfect. 2-10-9's Barboza, 1-10-8 Shane Burgos in the third. However, I think Burgos edges that second round. But for the winner of this one in the featherweight division, we are in a really, really, really good position. Little bit tricky though. Little bit tricky. It's a good position to be in, but there is such a logjam at the top of featherweight. It's going to be real tough for a lot of those contenders to finally break through into the top of that division because Holloway needs an opponent. Yair Rodriguez needs an opponent. We still haven't even booked Volkanovski versus Ortega. We don't know what date that's going to be. We've got to go through the whole of the Ultimate Fighter before we even know what date that's going to be on, and no one's probably going to watch that Ultimate Fighter season either. Like, there's a lot of a logjam right now at the top of the division, but the winner of this one is going to be on a McGregor card. If it's Shane Burgos, he's going to get a ton of momentum. I think the winner of this one should be looking at an opponent like Giga Chikadze. In all honesty, Giga Chikadze just got number 10 by beating Cub Swanson, which is very strange. Either way, though, he's undefeated in the UFC. Understandable, they moved him up the rankings. The winner of this one, Shane Burgos, Edson Barboza, is going to be ranked around the number 9 area. If Dan Ige loses to the Korean Zombie, I'm assuming they're going to shimmy above Dan Ige as well. Really good position to be in, and I think the next opponent should be Giga Chikadze. Put them on a co-main event of a fight night, on the main card of a pay-per-view, headliner of the prelims of a really good pay-per-view. We'll see what they do. I think that's probably the next matchup to make, and I would watch that one 100%. Imagine Giga Chikadze versus Edson Barboza. Imagine Giga Chikadze versus Shane Burgos. Absolute guaranteed chaos. Let's get these fun matchups made, and the loser of this one is going to be in a tricky situation. They're going to be right down the bottom of the rankings, especially if it's Barboza. He might even become unranked in the featherweight division. But for Shane Burgos, if he loses, it's redeemable. But Burgos has the kind of style where I don't see him fighting into being 34. Like, I don't see him having the career that Barboza has had, going into 34, 35 years of age. I think Burgos has the type of fighting style where it's now and he makes his run, or he takes too much damage and he's too damaged by the time he reaches the top. And I think that's a very worrying style to have, but I think it's going to be successful here against Edson Barboza in a very close fight where he edges out the second round, secures the third by 10-8. And I kind of want Shane Burgos to win anyway, just to have some young blood up the division. But Barboza would be very welcome there as well, because I would love to see Barboza against anyone, in all honesty. Very fun stuff. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'm going with Hurricane Shane Burgos. See you later.